Alright, so now we're going to go over are else and else if when they're used with if statements and how that actually ends up working out. So the else keyword, it turns out to be blue in VBA, and they're used with your multiple line if statements. Now, all of the code that is above your else keyword is going to be run if the condition ends up being true. However, if the condition in your if statement is false, everything below the else keyword is activated. So the syntax for this is as following. You have the if statement here, whatever condition you have, and if the condition ends up being true, this is the code that's going to be run, that's sandwiched between the if then statement, and then if the condition ends up being false, this is what's going to be run. It's important to note that only one or the other is going to be run at any given time using an if statement, and then this end if here is used to wrap this entire if statement together so that your code is one cohesive part. So now we're going to go through this example and how you can actually use else and else if to write if statements. So moving over to the example, I already typed this up. So we have this condition here. I expanded off of what our multiple line condition or multiple line if statement was. So if we have here our condition is actually false, we can step through this, see it's false here. It actually ends up jumping down to the bottom, and then the condition message box here pops up saying it's false. But if we actually go up here, make it true, if we step through again, you can see the other part of the code that's above the else is actually going to be run. Now you can actually expand on this using what's something called an else if. Now I'm going to define another variable as Boolean, and we're going to call this true. Now, if we actually expand this else and make it an else if instead, we're actually embedding another condition that we can work with. And here, this is where we're going to put our condition 2. 2 is true. And then we can also then finally expand with one else. And we have this here. So seeing how this actually works out in practice, going through here, you can see condition is true, condition 2 is true. So actually this is going to completely skip the else if. I have to change one thing. Let's make condition false. And moving through this, you can see condition false skips down to this else if. Because this is true here, it's going to hit this one here. Gives the message box, condition 2 is true. But if we make them both false, step through this code, hits here, this is false, skips down to the else if, this is false, skips down to the else, 1 and 2 are false. Some common points that you might run into as in errors. One thing, you might forget the if here for the else, you'll actually get a compile error. You can't have more than, you can't have an if statement or a statement that looks like an if statement that has this then here without having some type of if in front of it. Furthermore, if you forget this end if at the bottom, when you try to run your code, you will also get a compile error. But this is a block if without end if. So now that you know those two little traps, you can properly wrap your if statements and use them accordingly to significantly help control your flow of programming.